When you deal with mental health stuff, honestly, because I've come out of so much of it, it's almost like you can't talk about it. Because it's like this horrible spiral that you find yourself in, to where you literally don't want to be alive, but you can't even talk about it. You know, it's such a horrible thing. And so the best thing that I did was text back, actually, I'm not doing good at all.
You're listening to the Ferment Podcast, conversations about worship and transformation. Today's guest is James Duke. James is a guitar player based in Nashville, Tennessee, best known for his work with John Mark McMillan, Jesus Culture, Kim Walker, and Johnnyswim. This episode is brought to you by Monk Drums. Monk Drums is a creative desert venture that strives to combine beauty and business as one heartbeat. Monk Drums' main focus is handcrafted wooden drums that allow us to love, assist, and serve all who accompany us on this path. Use the coupon code FERMENTPOD to get 5% off your Monk Drums order. Find them on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Monk Drums, and every Monday look for hashtag Monk Drum Monday. Speaking from personal experience, Monk Drums are wonderfully crafted and they sound amazing. They blend the best traits of both the djembe and the cajon, and I found them to be incredibly versatile in both the live and studio environment. Check them out at monkdrums.com. This episode is brought to you by our friends at worshipteam.com. Worshipteam.com comes preloaded with over 12,000 songs, with new songs being added all the time. Hillsong, Bethel, Vineyard, Passion, Jesus Culture, just to name a few. Service building with Worship Team is a snap, and all the songs are completely legal and licensed. Visit them at worshipteam.com for a free trial today. You can also find them on social media, Facebook at worshipteam.com, Twitter at worshipteam, and Instagram at worshipteam_WT. Complete worship planning with thousands of songs, easy interface, mobile apps, and legal rights for your church. All you need in one place, worshipteam.com.
Hey everybody, this is Darren Verrier, Director of Publishing for Vineyard Worship. Our latest single, You're Carrying Me, written by my good friends Casey Coram and Chris McQueen, is the second of our monthly singles, available on the first Friday of every month.
I'm waiting, you're running, and I'm leaning into you. You're carrying me, and I choose to trust you, Lord. You're carrying me, and I choose to trust you, Lord. I trust you, I trust you, I trust you.
Check it out wherever you listen to music.
All right, everybody. Hey, my name is Adam Russell, and you are listening to the Ferment Podcast. And I'm sitting in a kitchen in Franklin, Tennessee, with my friend James Duke. James, why don't you say hello to everybody?
Hello, everybody.
That's right. James is a guitar player. Isn't that right? I think I have that right.
Yeah.
Yeah, among other things.
Among a couple other things, but yes.
Yeah. So, James, I think people know that they know you play guitar.
Yeah.
And I think they have seen you out with John Mark and Jesus Culture and Kim and all these people.
Mm-hmm.
I think they've seen you at shows,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm pretty sure that most people maybe don't know the backstory. Where you came from.
Mm-hmm.
How did you happen? So I'd love it if maybe up front we just spent a minute or two talking about, like, where did you grow up? When did you start playing music? Some of that.
Yep. I grew up in Jacksonville, Florida, Jacksonville Beach area. Yeah. My parents are preachers, missionaries.
Okay. Did you grow up like on the beach? Like, is that part of your story?
Yeah. We lived in Neptune Beach, which is one of the little towns all along the Jacksonville Beach area. And from about the time I was 12 until 20.
Yeah. You said your mom and dad are preachers. What kind of preachers are they?
Well, when I was born, they were pastors, and
Yeah.
they pastored a church in Neptune Beach called Beach's Chapel. It's still there. And then we moved to Douglas, Georgia.
Mm.
And they pastored a church there just for a few years, maybe 4 or 5 years. Then we moved back to Florida because he had been doing a lot of traveling, like mission. He calls himself a missionary. He was going back and forth to Africa all the time, and back in the early 80s, back when there was like communist countries and stuff, and smuggling Bibles across the borders and
Yeah.
having guns pointed in his face. And I'd say now he's more of like a evangelist. He would still say he's a missionary, which is old school, classic. But he's more of an evangelist now. Travels. He's been going primarily in Brazil, and he's been going there for about probably 30 years.
And your mom too?
And my mom too.
Does your mom speak?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you grew up in a family where you saw your dad preaching and your mom preaching.
Yeah.
So did you grow up like traveling with your parents at all, or were you mostly kind of like a homebody?
They never were in places for like super extended amounts of time, and they kind of kept a home life for us. And we had, for a lot of years, we had like a live-in, sort of like a nanny, but she was just, yeah, I think we called her a nanny. Her name was Heidi, and we grew up with her, and she lived with us. She was more than a nanny. She was just like part of the family.
Yeah.
But and so we had, they kept us, which is nice. They kept like a solid kind of home
Yeah.
vibe for us. And
Yeah. So you weren't just like military kids or like church kids that were moving every other weekend.
right, yeah. So we stayed, and then probably when I was, 9 or 10, I would say they started taking us with them on like summer trips. But we were home.
And then what kind of like faith tradition? Were you Baptist? What were y'all? Pentecostals?
Guess like Pentecostal. We always went to like non-denominational churches.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Holy Spirit churches?
Holy Spirit churches.
Yeah, that's who your parents are a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when did you start playing guitar? Was that the context for playing music?
Kind of. Probably around the time I was 11 or 12, I started wanting to play guitar. I believe like I might have always, for the last year or two before that, was kind of into it. But we always had a guitar in our closet. My dad always owned a guitar, even though I never saw him play it one time. And so, when you're little, you'd pull it out of the closet and play on it or bang on it for a little while and put it back. It wasn't anything more than that. But then some of my best friends at church, they got guitars and were going to start taking guitar lessons. And so I wanted to do that too. And so we would go and take guitar lessons, all three of us together, at the guitar player from our church at his house, which seems like the worst thing in the world. He did it. Three like 12 and 13-year-olds.
These are just your buddies?
Yeah.
Nice.
Just our buddies, and we'd all take, it was like a joint lesson for a long time. We'd all sit in a room.
So everybody's guitar is half out of tune, just janking.
And no one's doing anything.
Yeah.
But he was pretty patient for the most part. He was also really sarcastic, which might have been where I kind of got that from. But like, he'd be sitting there, and he would just be sitting
deeply formational.
He'd be sitting like 4 feet from you and just like making fun of you and stuff.
Hilarious.
That was funny. But yeah, so that's sort of how it started.
Yeah.
Yeah, just wanting to hang out with my friends.
Nice. What was your first guitar?
My first electric guitar, I think the guitar I took to the lessons, the first few, was my dad's Ovation. And it was like one of the like special anniversary models or something. So it had the thinner rounded back.
Ooh,
and had
very
like
nice.
this glitter looking thing on the plastic on the back. And, it was very professional looking. And so I took that with me. But I think my first electric guitar I got, my dad pulled out of the attic. And it was like this bolt-on Les Paul copy.
Yeah.
And so I would play that, and I loved it. And
maybe you should go to your dad's house and just see where else he might have a guitar right now.
He used to, yeah, there was a bunch of stuff up there for a while. So I got that, and I think a couple of days into it, my brother John was playing it, and the strap came off, and it hit the ground, and like the E or B tuner broke off. So I was like, it was never in tune. Probably wasn't in tune anyway, but it was unable to be in tune after that. And then I think the first one I got for myself was just a Epiphone Strat copy.
Yeah.
And what I really wanted was the Epiphone SG style guitar, but I didn't know what the body style was. And the guitar shop my dad took me to, I didn't know how to describe it, and the guy didn't have them, so he just acted like he didn't know what I was talking about because he wanted to sell a guitar to us that day.
Got it.
He was like, "Oh no, you need this one. This one's amazing."
Yeah.
But I was like, "Well, what about the one with like the horns on it?" It looks sort of like evil-ish kind of thing, like a weapon. He was like, "No, I don't know what you're talking about." I was like, "Okay, okay." And so that was my first guitar that I played for a few years.
Nice. And did you play music with those buddies beyond just going to guitar lessons?
Yes. With one of them, we started playing in the junior high youth band at my church. And then I started a band with my friend John that was in on those guitar lessons too. So that was my first band I started, was with him.
Amazing.
Yeah. He was more of the front man. He didn't play too much guitar in the band.
Any of these guys still musicians?
Yeah.
There you go. Hey, something happened. Like your youth guy was the guy.
Yeah. It was great. And so I think at the time too, our church was sort of going through a lot of like really powerful season. And there was like, I guess some in the South, you'd call it revival. We had revival.
Yeah. No, I think
had revival.
I think that's the word.
Okay.
Was this the mid 90s?
Yeah.
Yeah, dude. No,
it
wasn't the South, bro. This was everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
my friends and I, we laugh about this. In the 90s, and I talk to young worship leaders or young worship people now, and they never believe me, but I'm like, listen, in the 90s, you could play 2 chords and people would fall on the floor.
Yeah. Laughing or crying or
anything.
Whatever.
Who knows, right?
Yeah. And so when that kind of came to our church, kind of everything really changed for everybody. And so we'd be in church every day during the week.
Oh man, you guys had like,
oh yeah,
full on.
We went for it. Yeah. And they did morning and night time for weeks. And so, but because there was such an emphasis on the music, the worship, that just really affected me and my family and basically everyone there. But it was like a really important time in my life. And
how old were you?
I was probably 14.
Okay. And you were playing at this meeting?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Not all the time. I was just there.
You were
I just wanted to be there.
Of age in that atmosphere.
Yeah. That's when I really kind of was like, I want to do that. That's what I want to do. I want to.
Amazing.
Whatever they're doing up there, I want to be a part of that.
You know, it's interesting. When I was maybe 16, 17, something like that, I had known that I was called to be a preacher. Those words somehow resonated inside of me, like even from the time I was maybe 4. But I sort of struggled with it because we were at a really traditional church when I was in my middle teenage years. And then my father-in-law, who was not my father-in-law at the time, so Heather's dad, he finds out about this thing called Toronto Blessing, which is like, it's the epicenter of everything you and I are talking about right now. So before Heather and I are married, when I'm just a young teenage punk, he gets curious and decides that we should go. So he takes me, like road trip, he and we fly up, right? And I went into that room and I was completely unprepared for what was going to happen. But long story short is that something about that atmosphere, it so touched my heart that I remember praying a really innocent and super naive prayer. But the prayer was, if I can do that, whatever that is up there, I'm in.
Yeah.
So I resonate with that story. Something happened.
That was basically the same thing for me. Like it just changed everything. It made me realize what it could be, maybe, even though when I listened back, like there was a record that came out of that time at our church and I listened to it every night, every single night for I don't even know how long, months, maybe years. I would have it on when I was sleeping. I just listened to it all the time, and it yeah, it was just something. I mean, it's like the right age too. I feel like around that age is when like you start to like notice things and get inspired by things. And but yeah, that time at our church like really changed my life and my whole family's. Basically my parents, everything changed for their ministry. um it just really, it was really like life changing for sure.
Yeah. So it was powerful Holy Spirit moments.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's great. Is that what you've been chasing?
that's what I always chase.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to put it so so sharp, but I guess is that the thing that we're always looking for, huh?
Yeah. I mean, when I was well, even before that, because I grew up with 4 kids, and so that's loud
Mhm.
in your house, you know?
Yeah.
And we'd all be fighting, and we'd be just being horrible kids. And my mom would go to the stereo and just put like a worship album on.
Yeah.
And then, slowly everyone would just kind of chill out,
Mhm.
and you'd sit down on the couch and just not worry, not be mad anymore, whatever, it
Yeah.
changes the room, it changes the atmosphere.
Yeah.
And so we learned that, me and my brother John talk about that a lot. It's like remembering how like that changes it really changes the atmosphere of a room, and how worship changes the atmosphere of every space. And that's always my goal. That's always what I want. That's always what I'm after.
Yeah.
Even doesn't matter who I'm playing with, doesn't matter where I'm playing, if I'm playing in a huge church or I'm playing in a arena or I'm playing like a dirty nasty club.
Mhm.
And if I'm playing with Christians and that want the same things, or I'm playing with people that don't believe there is a God,
Yeah.
that's what I'm after
Mm.
all the time.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. I love that you would bring that in any space too.
Yeah, because it doesn't, to me, that's the only thing that I care about, honestly.
Yeah.
Like I don't care about if I'm a rock star, and I don't care about all this other crap. I just want stuff to be, I want to feel the Holy Spirit move in a room.
Yeah.
And so
That's amazing.
that's like the goal when I pick up an instrument or whatever.
How have you held on to that fire? Because you've been at this for 20 years. I think, but maybe one of the things I wanted to like just sort of drop in here is that you haven't just been doing this for a minute.
Yeah.
You've been doing this for 20 years and you're still chasing that. So how do you hang on to that kind of fire?
Oh, you don't always hang on to it, Sorry, I'm touch everything.
That's great. I think you,
My
by
wife, sweet potatoes.
there's sweet potatoes here on the table.
My wife has to take stuff out of my hands because I'll just do it. Anyway,
Well, talk to me about not always keeping the fire.
I definitely care about that. That's always something I care about. But I would say it's not always something, no, you just can't keep it all the time. It's impossible, It's like you can't be on in performance mode all the time, and you can't, whatever.
Yeah, I do think there's an emotional energy in revival that's really seductive,
Yeah.
but it's ultimately also at the same time like exhausting.
Yeah.
Right?
And like the fire is not the same as like not getting burned out. Like you can get burned out and that still be what you want.
Yeah.
But you can be burned out and not happy with where you're at in your life,
Yeah.
which happens all the time,
Sure.
weekly probably.
Yeah.
But I would say for me, it's about being part of something that I feel like I can hold on to. Basically, my whole career, I guess you could call it, I have noticed, and for a long time, it was my only thing I wanted to do was just play with people like my friends or people that I love, and music that I believed in, and music that made me feel something before I even picked up a guitar. And so that's a big part of it. And the times where I have felt like I was struggling with that or not necessarily like when I get burned out and it's like I don't feel like I can do what I do, or the times when I'm not in those positions and I'm not in those situations, even if the people I'm with are amazing people and that I do believe in, but it's when I don't feel activated, I guess. Does that make sense?
Yeah. What makes you feel activated? I mean, you said friendship, believing in the music. Those are maybe activating points.
Yeah. I guess it's more like if I am able to communicate.
Yeah. Yeah, from your guitar, from what you're doing and what you're bringing.
Because that's literally 90% of the time how I say anything.
Amazing. So you feel a deep connection to the instrument and to the music in that way.
Yeah. One of the frustrating things with my wife that she gets frustrated about is like she'll be talking to me and like I'm processing, but I don't talk back necessarily, and I've kind of learned to be like, let me think about that because I don't know what to say right now. But I feel like when I'm playing music and I'm playing my guitar, that's when all the emotion comes out, because I think I bottle up stuff so much. That's how I release stuff. That's when people come to my mind that I need to pray for. And that's when like, it's when like I start feeling that, like I start feeling like that kind of connection with the Holy Spirit that people literally just pop in my mind all the time.
Amazing.
And so that's honestly how I do most of my communication.
Amazing.
And I know a lot of people say stuff like that and it can sound so like,
no, I think
it sounds like almost like nothing, but it's true for me. It's like really how it works.
No, I've experienced it. You and I have known each other for a few years. It's not like we're super close buds, but one of the things that I've come to appreciate about you, and one of the things I know about you, and it's almost a paradox in who you are.
Right.
You've just highlighted it, is that you're this quiet, reserved person, but when you are on stage with your guitar, you there's something coming from you,
right?
That sound is, and it's not just volume, it's like a depth to the sound,
right?
So I've experienced that, and I think that's the reason why you do what you do.
Yeah.
I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but does that feel right?
Yeah, especially when people first meet me. I'm super quiet. I spent a lot of years just being like really shy, which a lot of people confused for being like arrogant or snobby or whatever, but I was just quiet and honestly just felt like I don't want anybody to look at me.
Were you a quiet kid?
I think so. I mean, until I get like, I can definitely get loud or not like that, but it's usually like not until like I'm comfortable, And so when you get older, you kind of recognize certain things about yourself and you're like, well, maybe I can actually like engage with people a little bit better than I'm doing right now,
Yeah.
Instead of just like nodding or saying yes or no only, like actually like say something.
Yeah.
And so for a long time though, it was just like painful. So like daily life, I grew up being super insecure, and shy and quiet and not wanting to be the one that people looked at. But when I would play guitar, that's when I'm fearless, sort of.
That is such a amazing story, and I've heard it from a few people, but it's interesting how that works.
Yeah.
So when did the self-awareness start happening for you, even about like, okay, I'm a little shy or quiet, but I could say something right now. When did you start growing in that part? Because that's an interesting switch to make, you know?
Not until way too late, I would say.
Mm.
But I mean, even like little things like when people would want to like hire me for stuff.
Mm.
And they'd be like, I'd love you to play on my record. I really just, whatever we can do to make it work. And I'd just be like, okay. And like, I would make it like so hard for the person to even get me. Like, how about you give them your number, James? How about you give them your email or say, I would love to do that. Let's talk more about it. Instead of just, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess just find me on MySpace or something. And so, and so I remember then kind of being like, you can like give them a little more. You don't have to make it so hard on the person, you know? And, but that was like, I don't know, 20s, maybe later.
Isn't it funny how it does take us a while to like learn ourselves?
Yeah. Yes.
Just sort of wake up to who we are.
Yeah. I feel like I haven't even done that, but for the last like 3 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Richard Rohr talks about some of that. You ever read his book called Falling Upward?
No.
Yeah. It kind of explains some of what we're just talking about even now, because in that book, he talks about there's being two halves of life. And your first half of life is this one thing, and then your second half of life tends to be this other thing.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like waking up to who you are.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like I have, especially the last year, definitely have learned more about myself than I have my whole life.
Really? Okay. What has precipitated that process?
I would say it had been from dealing with like really serious depression for about 3 years, like seriously bad. And so, and not telling anybody. And finally getting to the point where I couldn't do that anymore. And so I don't talk about it much, so it's kind of hard to talk about. But last year, about this time last year, I had just really been not doing good. And I finally had this afternoon where I kind of just couldn't be quiet about it anymore. Yeah. And so through that process and finally even just like talking to my wife about it.
Yeah.
And
did that conversation even feel big?
At the time it didn't, because of where I was at.
Yeah.
You know, it basically just got to the point where I had been so when you deal with like mental health stuff, it gets to the point where, and this is what makes it so horrible for people, is you spiral and spiral and spiral to where like you can't do anything. And so, and it affects everything. And so when I was living like that and just living in hell, basically, for a long time. And when I finally, one afternoon, just realized, like, why am I telling everybody I'm okay?
Yeah.
And so when I finally did that, that was like the kind of turning point. And it didn't get better. You know what I mean? Yeah. But I at least accepted help from people.
Yeah.
And
so you told your wife first?
Well, I was texting with one of my friends, and I had to leave that night to go on a trip. And he said, "How are you?" And I said, "I'm good," like I always do, because I'm 9.
You're an Enneagram 9.
And you don't want to be, you don't,
I don't want to upset your life, right?
Yeah, you don't want to be one more thing for anybody. Yeah. And I can't remember what we were even talking about, but it was over text. And I said, "Why did you just say that? It's not even like, why did you say that? You could have just said nothing." Or, "Why did you say you're fine? You're not fine." And I wrote him back and I said, "Actually, I'm not okay." Yeah. And he called me back immediately, which I'm so thankful for.
Oh, isn't it good to have a friend?
Yeah. Which I could have done that 3 years ago, but I didn't. Yeah. And so I talked to him, and really kind of just fell to pieces. And then I got off the phone with him, and I walked in the kitchen, and Jackie was in there. She's like, "What is wrong?" And I was like, and I just told her.
Yeah.
And it was really cool because I had like 2 hours until I had to go to the airport. It's perfect timing, but it's great. And so I had already kind of started the process with getting some help. I just hadn't like really told like what's actually happening. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that was like the big change for me. And so getting help, like actually talking to people about it, kind of made it worse at first, but then it made it so much better because at least like
You didn't
people
have to
know.
pretend.
Yeah,
you
at
didn't have
least
to
people
pretend.
just know. And so at first, like it's horrible because when you talk about it, you realize how bad it is, you know? Like when you're not talking about it, like you can almost live with it, even though you almost can't live with it. But when you start saying what's happening to you, it's like so sad almost. It is sad. It's so sad and hard that it makes you feel like you're even like worse almost at first. But through actually like talking about it more and telling Jackie and just talking to some people, and I haven't really talked about it much anyway, but I'm glad we're talking about it because it's such an important thing, especially now.
Well, and the thing is James, so many people carry this stuff around.
Yeah.
And they never tell anyone.
Yeah. Yeah. And so through that process and like getting the help I needed to actually get it addressed, and slowly kind of coming out of that fog, because I basically lived feeling like I was underwater or like I couldn't move my body, like I could move, but I felt like so heavy all the time that it was like, felt like I couldn't snap out of it, which is such a weird thing to go through. So like when you're working and you got nothing and your mind's numb and your body feels dead and you're just having to like power through it.
Yeah.
When I did it, but it was so hard all the time.
Yeah.
And it's hard to do that when the whole way that you feel like you can only do what you do is when your heart can be activated and your heart is dying, basically. And so through that process, I learned a lot about myself. Like I finally realized like I've been dealing with this my whole life. It would come and go more, but I dealt with those same feelings almost, I can think back until like my early teens dealing with stuff like that. And it had just finally gotten to the point where I couldn't snap out of it ever. And so like even realizing that about yourself is so important, because then you can like look back and understand why you did things you did, And I can like identify in other people a lot of times now. Like I can see when people tell me that they're having problems with a person, or I can and I hear what is going on. A lot of times I know what's happening with them.
Yeah, you have grace for it. Your radar.
Yeah, and it definitely brings a lot more compassion.
Yeah.
And so I finally got to the point last year where I felt like I had sort of gotten my life back. And at least that part of my life back. And so that was like last year was like a really big year for me with that, just coming out of that and finally getting to the point. It wasn't until like probably the fall where I would play music and actually feel like I used to feel. So even that, it took months and months, and it was like a couple years that had been like that, and it took more time. And I would say I learned so much about myself through that, and I learned how, you just learn like, because a lot of times it doesn't dawn on you what you're going through, if it's not like a broken arm and you're like, oh, I have a broken arm. But when you're just sad all the time and you don't know why, but you just are, like, you don't understand that. Like, it's hard to even understand that. And so when I talk to people now, or or I listen to other people that are going through the same thing. Like it brings such a compassion to my heart just for people, because so many people deal with that stuff, you know. And I would say the last the last couple of months, I felt almost like I had sort of slipped back into some of that stuff, but it was in a different way. And it was more like anxiety, which goes hand in hand with that stuff. But realizing that even, and then looking back at patterns I had gone through and for years even, and then being able to address that and finding ways to fix that, or not to fix it, but to snap yourself out of it, and to like not just let yourself just be shut down, but actually say, no, you can get up. You can get up. You can look at, I look at myself in the mirror every day and I say, this day is going to be good, and you're going to make it. And you're going to work, and you're going to do this stuff you have to do, and you're going to record or whatever. And you're going to be good, and it's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
And
so is that a part of your history, swinging between depression and anxiety?
I think, yeah.
Yeah.
And so
you didn't realize it at the time, but now.
Yeah. Like really bad anxiety. And I realize now, like, that's why I was so quiet for so long, you know, to people. And I'd walk into a room, and it's like, it's such a funny thing, because I can go up on stage and just play loud and do whatever I want and not care at all what people think about it. Like, I don't care. I don't care if I mess up. I don't care any of that. I just go and do it. But then when I'm not on stage, and it's like, when I'm on stage, it's like, I want people to look at me, but I just don't want all the attention. Like, I want some of the attention, definitely. I just don't want all of the attention. But like a lot of times when I am off stage, I don't want any attention. And so even like starting a podcast, it takes me a minute, because I'm like, oh, it's hard. It's hard to like engage that when I'm, you know what I mean? It's hard to like, because it's a different kind of thing you have to turn, or I have to turn on, to be able to be like, just talk. Yeah. It's okay. Because I don't like, it makes me anxious. It makes me, it's like almost like, in some ways, it's like the worst thing. And like, even like answering questions to people, not with you, but like,
it's
family.
Fine if it's with me.
No, it's not, like, because these are fine. But like, people might just say like, how was the tour? And it's like, sometimes it feels like the worst question in the world. And that's like an easy question to say. Sure. You could say, oh, it was fine. But I learned through counseling that fine is not a feeling word. So I try not to say that anymore. Because I used to do that all the time. How was the show? It was fine. Yeah. It was fine, you know. Yeah. It would kind of suck, but it was fine.
It's interesting you said that, that fine is not a feeling word. Okay, so back in, what was it? September, Heather and I, we went to this marriage thing.
Yeah.
And it was basically like a marriage counseling kind of a thing for the weekend. It was like a retreat kind of deal.
Yeah.
And the people up front were like, okay, you have to go talk to your spouse, and you can only use feeling words. And they handed out a list of feeling words. And I could feel the intimidation coming off of that list at me.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like, holy crap, I can only use feeling words? It's funny how that is a real thing. And it just became, at least in that moment, a growth place for me, you know? Because it's so easy to, I don't even know the word for it, to want to not talk about our feelings.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think, and so that's so hard, like when you're on tour and your wife's like, how was the show? And you say, it was good, or it was fine, or whatever. Like, you don't even give a real answer. Yeah. And so that makes whoever you're talking to want to be like, okay, well, if every time it's fine, why do I even ask? And then you're like, hey, why aren't you asking me on the show with it anymore? But like, even if I only had that takeaway from seeing a counselor, it was like, it made me realize, like, you can actually talk about how you don't have to be like shy and insecure about that kind of stuff, especially with your wife.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
right.
Family. Yeah. But like, sometimes even like casual questions, I can see now for a long time, would like really be hard for me. Yeah.
Yeah.
I get like super embarrassed if something wrong happens or something breaks or something like that. And then if other people start talking about it, it like makes me want to die.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's so weird.
Yeah. And in reality, it maybe wasn't a huge deal.
No,
but
never.
You feel it as a
No,
huge deal.
and I know from way back. I mean, this is when, so I've learned this kind of stuff even in the last couple of months. Way back, I'd be laying in bed so upset and, lights off, just laying in bed, can't go to sleep, so upset. And I had no idea why. And I'd finally have to go like, okay, why are you upset? What happened? Let's Tarantino this. And like, and like go back. And it'd be like, oh, you said something 4 days ago to somebody and you felt like it hurt their feelings. You don't even know if it hurt their feelings.
Yeah.
You felt like you did
And you've been carrying
because they laughed for a second and then they looked kind of sad. And I would carry that for a long time.
And then it just
one
grows.
instance. And it would like spiral and I'd just spiral and spiral and spiral. And so like I can look back now and be like, oh yeah, I've dealt with this for a long time. Like I can't it's hard for me to even listen to voicemails. Like this is like really soul bearing, but it's fine. I'm not ashamed of it. But stuff like that, like any kind of thing, I put the pressure on me over stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like I feel like it's hard to check the mail sometimes.
Why would voicemail be a thing?
I don't know.
Are you afraid it's bad news?
I don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
It's like that.
Yeah.
Or like phone calls, answering the phone, even if it's somebody I love. Sometimes I'm just like, I can't do that. And so like, and I can see that over years that I dealt with that, but I didn't think much about it. I just thought, oh yeah, it's hard for me.
Yeah. So what I hear in what you've been saying anyway, is that some of this stuff that was resident within you, but wasn't being dealt with, was paralyzing you.
Yes.
I hear paralyzing
Exactly.
language.
Paralyzed.
Can't answer the phone. Can't look at voicemail. Can't get out of bed.
Yeah.
Don't want to go to work.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Would you say that's what maybe depression?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Paralyzing.
Paralyzing. Exactly. Like I felt paralyzed for a long time. It's been one of the it's probably been the hardest time of my life, but I've learned so much about why I do what I do and why I have done what I have done and even if like the stuff you did was wrong and you made bad decisions, but being able to look back and like seeing like, think about the headspace you were in, James. Like, of course you were engaged in your life and stuff like that. Like just realizing that and having to, and like talking more about it and like really having talks with Jackie about it and stuff like that has been so almost life-giving when you feel like you don't have any life, you know? And
it's interesting how if you can finally be honest about who you really, really are, just makes all the difference.
I know. And yeah, for sure. And so it's like, it's such a stigma attached to like mental health and stuff like that. Like that's why it's even hard sometimes. Like you don't even want to say like, oh, I was depressed, because people are like, I'm sad too, man. Everybody gets sad. It's not that. It's like when you deal with mental health stuff, it's not just that. It's not like I had a bad day.
Yes, we're not talking about garden variety.
Yeah. And so it's almost like, and then if you actually talk about it, you like feel like you're making yourself sound like you're not a normal person, but you are a normal person. But like, and so like there definitely can be like a stigma to it, but honestly, like because I've come out of so much of it, I still deal with it, but because I've come out of it so much, I feel like I want to talk about it almost, just because when you feel like finally free from something, you're like, this is so important. Like I actually have something I will talk to people about. You know what I mean? Like,
of course. Well, Jack Deere came to my church many years ago, and he said something that I've never gotten over. Jack said in one of his sermons, anything you can't talk about owns you. And it's just so true. And then once you start to own something, you can talk about it.
Right.
You know, and I found both of those to be true.
Yeah.
And yeah. So, I mean, even now, this conversation we're having, it's going to help people.
Yeah.
Because people are going to hear this and go, okay, this is my experience, and I have to begin to open up about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like the hardest thing to do, especially when you're dealing with it. If you're dealing with it really severely, it's almost like you can't talk about it.
Yeah.
Because it's this horrible spiral that you find yourself in, to where you don't feel like yourself, and you might hate yourself.
Yeah.
Literally might hate yourself. You might just be so sick of yourself. And you're just hopeless and literally don't want to be alive, but you can't even talk about it.
Yeah.
It's such a horrible thing. And so the best thing that I did was text back, actually, I'm not doing good at all.
This brings up at least a couple observations, and then maybe a question or two. One observation I have, even from just the things that we've been talking about, is you said you'd been feeling really bad.
Yeah.
Like really your whole life, but then it got really acute for like 3 years or something. Then your friend texted you and you said, no, I'm not okay. And then you came home and told Jackie, and you're like, I'm not okay. And you told some people, but you didn't feel better immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one observation I have about that, because I think it's really important, especially for people who are dealing with this or almost anything, like feelings are almost always the last thing that comes.
Mm-hmm.
That's been my experience anyways. There's some actions you can take. Like, so you did the right thing by telling your friend, you did the right thing by talking to your wife, you've done the right thing by going to counseling or whatever, those are all the right things, and feelings come last.
Yeah.
And so we kind of have to be patient with the process. Huh?
Yeah. And it was funny, the first time I talked actually to a doctor about it was a long time ago. Before all that, I had gone to a doctor just like after I moved here, just to like go to the doctor, because that's what you do when you're an adult. You like you had to establish health care or yourself with the doctor.
Get
Whatever.
your
I don't even know what
cholesterol
I don't even know
checked.
what it's called. But so just the normal stuff. And when he was saying, okay, okay, well, good for all that. Is there anything else? And I just said, I feel bad every day. And he's like, really? Like what? And I said, I feel like I am in a fog and I can't snap out of it. And he was like, okay. And so he's like, lay down. He's like poking around in my stomach and stuff. I don't know why. Maybe he was just thought I don't know. Yeah. But he was like examining me a little bit.
Yeah.
And then he said, do you like your job? And I said, no.
Yeah.
And he said, do you care about what you do? And I said, no. And that was like the first time I was actually even honest about any of it. Mm-hmm. And he said, okay. And he said, well, I feel like you're dealing with depression. And so let's worry about that first. And I was like, okay. And so then he's like, let's get you scheduled. And I couldn't get scheduled for an appointment for like 5 months. Yeah. It's like a long time. Yeah. And so it was like, he was like, you're super depressed. Come back in 4 months or 5 months and we'll see you then. I was like, really? You just gonna
what
leave
about
me
tomorrow?
Like this?
Yeah.
You're like, wait a minute. You're the one that just diagnosed me with this. But so like I'm saying that to say like, the whole thing's a process. Mm-hmm. So the longer you wait, doesn't get better.
Yeah.
In my experience.
Yeah.
And so the longer you put off even talking to someone, the longer you put off going to a doctor to try to address it, the longer you put off after you get a prescription, the longer you put off getting it filled.
Yeah.
The longer, even stuff like that. Yeah. It's all a process, because then when you do finally get your prescription filled, it takes weeks for it to even start working. if you're getting medicine. And so it all is such a process that you can't afford to wait.
Yeah. That's a good word. That's a good word. I did have another question like about this, if it's okay. What was it like? What was it like being severely depressed and then being on tour with a really big worship event?
Normal.
Just because that's how you'd live for so long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's hard because you still have moments where you're having fun and you're happy and laughing. But for me, it was always like, and I still feel like this sometimes, that you can be feeling fine, having a great day. You haven't felt symptoms like that in a long time, but a lot of times you still know it's there. And it's a very hard thing to articulate, but it's almost just like in your mind, there's a spot and you know that spot's there.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, it's always kind of there in your mind, but I mean, I would still make people laugh and have fun and all that stuff. And so I think but the main thing was you just sort of become disengaged and you kind of shut down a little bit and you stop communicating with people, you stop texting people back, you stop calling home as much and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of, and I've talked to tons of musicians about that, like even that being on tour, like you get in this kind of funk, and whether you deal with this kind of stuff or not, that the longer you are out, the more like you stop communicating with other people not around you and stuff. And so that's like a dangerous thing anyway. But I would just do what I had to do.
Yeah. It was just your way of being.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, James, this has taken a turn that I didn't expect us to talk about.
We can talk about something fun if you want.
No, this has been good. This has been really good because I think, well, this has been my experience for the last several years anyway. I turned 40 last May. How old are you?
I turned 40 about 5-6 days ago.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Welcome. No, but the reason I'm saying that is like for the last 3 or 4 years, I've just been with so many people who are in their mid 30s, 40s, whatever. And I just have this theory I'm like, clearly I'm not a doctor. I am just a pastor guy, whatever, you know. I don't have a PhD, don't even want one. God bless everyone who has one, all that. But I've sort of acquired this theory that like, apparently, like life is always real.
Mm-hmm.
From the time you're born until the day you die. Life is always real. It's happening. But there's something that happens when people get around 35, 36, 40, something. There's this window when the culmination of your life, all the decisions you've made, all the things that have happened to you, it just sort of, it spills over. And then people either sort of harness that and take hold of it and get real about it, or they don't. And then all kinds of things happen.
Right.
And I'm just glad we're having this conversation because I know there's a lot of people who are maybe much younger than you and I, or maybe older than us, or maybe like right in that window that we're at, and they're hearing this and it's going to give them permission to be brave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's been very eye-opening for me, and probably my wife too, just having like really honest questions about what was going on, or honest conversations about it. But I mean, if I could do it all over again, of course I would say I'd like to do the last few years without dealing with all that. But last year, I probably wouldn't trade for anything, honestly, because I learned how to actually talk and how to like actually allow myself to tell people that I'm not okay, and that, because you know the thing is with me, I've always been, I don't want to be trouble for anybody. I don't want to be a bother. I don't want to be a burden. I don't want to inconvenience anybody ever. And so on one hand, that's like a good person to have around you when you're on tour.
Yeah, low maintenance.
Low maintenance, agreeable, fun, good attitude. But I would just I sacrificed myself so really bad at that.
Yeah, and tour is isolating anyway.
Yeah. And just at home, on tour, wherever I was, I did a disservice to myself by not because there's plenty of times it could not have been mental health stuff. It could have been stress over finances or relationships with people or just any kind of thing. But I would never talk to anybody about it. And I always, not only would I not talk to anybody about it, if something came out that was like people knew what's going on, I would always say like, it's okay. They'd be like, I'm sorry that happened. I'm like, it's okay. And like almost try to make them feel better when they're not the ones that felt bad. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I did that all the time. And just letting myself actually kind of take care of myself a little bit even.
And it's huge.
Has been a huge thing.
I am a pastor, so I have to pull the Bible in occasionally.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus says this amazing thing. He says, if you're going to be my disciple, you should probably love your neighbor as you love yourself.
Yeah.
And it has occurred to me that if you don't love yourself, how can you even love your neighbor, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, for sure. And then, the Bible says that your heart's the wellspring,
Yeah.
And if your heart is broken or your heart feels dead or your heart is just sick, then there's nothing you can do.
Well, and here's the other thing about that image, because that's one of my favorite passages. Depending on the translation, it'll say wellspring or fountain or headwater. The trouble with having your heart be a toxic fountain is that everybody downstream from you is getting that, right? So it's not just you. It's that now I've become someone who's...
Yeah. Even if you're not like spewing stuff on people.
Yeah, of course not. Just,
what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's not like, even like, because people might attribute that to just like negative people or people, but like, even if you're it's all internal and you do your best to like not affect anyone, that affects people. And one of my favorite books is from Dave Eggers, and it's called What is the What? Have you read that?
I have not.
It's about the Sudanese lost boys and when they had to, there's a bunch of like basically orphaned boys that marched out of Sudan for I can't remember what country, Tanzania or Kenya or something, because of the wars that were going on in Sudan. And they were, long lines of boys just led by one older boy, basically, and just marching straight and getting attacked by lions and getting, the Pakistani armies flying over them, shooting at them, and just all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
And they, it took forever for them to get to where they wanted to go. Months, I think. And there was one part where he's saying, when you're in a situation like that, you realize that you can see what you look like by looking at the people around you. And so he said, today I don't look good. My ribs are poking through a little more. My eyes are a little more sunken into my head. And just saying like, he knew he looked that way.
Because that's how everyone
Because that's what they look like.
Yeah.
And, there was no mirror. They were the mirrors. And that has stuck with me for years because to me, that's such like an eye-opening thing about community and the community you're in and the people you surround yourself in and your families and stuff, that you realize that, like you see, like, even if you're dealing with mental health stuff, that affects the people around you, that affects your kids, even if you're not outward with it, even if it's not expressed outwardly, like that affects, but it's still affecting everything around you. And so, yeah, it's like it becomes such a thing with that. But realizing that if you can look around at the people that you're with, and you can start to see, and you look with those kind of eyes, you can start to see that even if they're not saying it, maybe maybe he's having a hard time, And so I try to keep that in my mind too a lot. Just
That's a beautiful image.
Yeah.
We're always a mirror.
Yep.
Yeah. I believe that.
Yeah.
I think that's what Paul maybe means when he says, if one part of the body suffers, the whole body suffers.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think so. That's great.
Yeah, man.
Well, James, thank you for being so honest. It's going to help people.
Yeah, I wasn't I?
Yeah, you were.
It's cool. Yeah,
Yeah,
I feel like this is something that's really important to talk about.
I think so too. I just have one question I ask everybody at the very end, and it's the same question every single podcast. I just ask people to maybe relate a time that you experienced great joy.
Okay. I would say it was.
And it doesn't even have to be the most epic either.
Yeah. Last Saturday night, my wife threw like a surprise party for me.
Mm.
And I kind of knew a little bit what was happening. So I knew I could expect a couple of people there. But when I got there, like on the way there, I thought, what would be funny is if I acted like it was actually a surprise party. And this is just sort of the way I'm always thinking, but I was like, I should blindfold myself every time somebody walks in the door, like sit on the couch, and when the knock on the door comes, just wrap a bandana around my eyes and act like I don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
And so I kind of missed the opportunity a couple of times because I was doing whatever. But then I was sitting at the table talking to some people, and I heard a knock on the door, and I was like, this is my chance. And so I pulled the bandana out of my jacket and I tied it around my eyes, and everyone was like, what are you doing? And I just sat there, and then those people walked in, and I didn't hear anything yet.
Yeah.
And so I pulled the bandana off, and it was your sister right up in my face.
That's hilarious.
And your sister and Eric. And that was like the biggest, they were like the last people I thought would be there. And that made me so happy. And I just told my wife later, like the day after, I was like, thank you for doing that. It was really cool. Yeah. And just something little like that, but it meant so much. Like that was like, out of all the people I could have blindfolded myself for, like that's hilarious that I actually did it for them.
Yeah.
And
That's
so
good.
that made me so happy.
Yeah. Little moment of joy right
Yeah,
here.
just right there,
recently.
sprinkled in.
That's good. Well, James, thanks for opening up. Really
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Super fun episode.
Yeah, no, this is great. And you got to promise me this.
Okay.
You got to come back on this podcast
Okay.
because I have 19 more questions I want to ask.
Oh, okay.
Is that
We'll
cool?
do it. Yeah.
All right, that's an agreement. Peace, everybody.
Hey everybody, this is Casey Corum, the producer of the Ferment Podcast. Thanks for listening. If you've been enjoying the podcast, I've got a couple ways you could really help us. First of all, review the podcast on iTunes or the podcast platform of your choice. This helps more people find us. Also, connect with us on social media, on Instagram at the Ferment Podcast and on Twitter at FermentCast. All right, people, see you next time.